What is going on, guys? I'm back on the mic today from Spektral Sound, and it is time to find out which sound you guys requested on my previous video. Because as some of you may know, if you have seen the video, I talk about how I'm bringing the sound design request system back. For more info on that, you can just take a look at this video. It should be right on my page. But let's see what sound you guys like the most. Drum roll, please. Thug Biscuit requested Want Anything Soltan. Thank you, that really helps. Actually, I was really pretty okay with that because that let me do whichever Soltan sound I wanted. So he's coming out with his new EP, so why not do a track from that? This is actually the main Screech sound from his track Realm. Now I know Rocket Powered Sound already did a recreation of this on one of his live streams, but I made this before he did that live stream. That was complete coincidence, and our two recreations turned out like completely different. So I decided to just keep going and record this tutorial. Without further ado, here's what it sounds like.
Let the beast work, yeah.
Now I know this is not the most accurate recreation, those sounds are obviously very different, but it is very Soltan-like, and at the end of the day, that's what was requested. Thank you, Thug Biscuit. Feels so weird not having like hair in my face. I feel like CM Punk, I don't know.
Look in my eyes, what do you see?
This is a MIDI right here for the serum patch. What you're seeing back there is the sub, and that's a little more complicated, but I'll just get to that later. For right now, let's just hop right into the patch.
The cult of personality.
This is what the sound sounds like by itself. First things first, the wavetable for this one is going to be Square Saw Bend times 3, which is actually one of the wavetables in my preset pack with Ghost Hack Next Gen presets. If you want to go pick that up, there's a link in the description, but it's this wavetable right here, and it looks like this. It's a really complex, very frequent wavetable, and I will leave the wavetable link down in the description, but the point here is that this is a very kind of complex wavetable that you're looking at right here, and that's why I'm using it to get those high frequency kind of screechy content. I have the wavetable position at 130, and it is modulating back and forth 7 with LFO4 here. LFO4 is just a triangle wave. I turned it off BPM and it's just on 3 Hertz on free. And this is just going to be a kind of vibrating, slow motion. And it's just going to add more life to the sound, how it's just scrolling through the wavetable a little bit. It'll just keep it from being so static. I'm doing a lot of things with the LFOs here. I'm going to get to them as I go through the patch and show you what's connected with what. But for right now, that's what that is. I have FM from B on at 34%. You're not going to hear that yet because B isn't turned on, but it's going to be very important to the screech element of the sound. Volume's just normal at 75, and that is all for this section. If you go up here, the octave is down 1. The semitones is actually up 12, but it's being modulated with a different modulator. Again, I'll get to that. And everything else is normal. Now let's see what's modulating all of these. The first one right here, the semitones, is actually being modulated by envelope 2. Now if you see what this is doing, when we press down a note, it's doing a quick attack downward, and then it does have some release, but that doesn't really matter because there's no release on envelope 1, so you don't have to really worry about that. Basically what I wanted to do here is as soon as I press the note, I wanted it to do a really quick drop down from an octave, and that's what I did here. That's why it's up 1 octave going down 50%. It's going to go from 1 octave down to normal, which is what this is doing. That's why you get the... It's just a little drop. And there's also other pitch dropping, but that's all that is, just a short thing. You can also do this with the LFOs if you just turn on envelope mode, but I decided to just use the envelope for that one because I'd already used a lot of LFOs. All right, for the fine tune, I'm using LFO 3 for this one. You can see it's a triangle wave, very similar to LFO 4, except it's brought down. It's not quite as high of a volume, back and forth. This is going to be a vibrato. I have it on 10.9, and it is on the fine tune going up 50%, so from 0 50 back and forth, not a full semitone each way, just like half a semitone each way. And that's the exact same thing for oscillator B right here in the fine pitch. It's doing the exact same thing. That's just your basic kind of vibrato is what I was doing right there. Now this is the interesting thing. On the coarse pitch, I have LFO 2 on here, and it is going up 9. What this is doing is at the very end of the note, like right before it's released in the actual track, it goes up really high. It does this like up super high. And I wanted to achieve that with this. You see it's at normal level and then it's going up. Here's another thing. You have to make sure on the fine tune for LFO 3 and on the coarse pitch for LFO 2, you want to make sure these are bipolar. They're not just going one direction. And the best way to do it is to find wherever it is on the matrix and make sure that these arrows are pointing both directions versus one direction right there, like in the cutoff. All right, that is all for that. Now let's turn on oscillator B. This is going to be a basic MCB in the analog tab. and we're going to drop this down 1 octave again. And like I said, we're doing the same thing with the fine tune right there. But other than that, nothing weird is happening. The position is all the way down just on the normal kind of saw wave. It's not quite a saw wave. It's a little bit different, like as far as, you know, the harmonics and the phases and stuff. It's a little warped, but that's why I chose it. I didn't want it to be a straight saw wave because the straight saw wave didn't sound how I wanted it to. I was just going through the basic shapes and finding the sound that, you know, gave the right FM style. So nothing weird here at all. Literally just the fine tune modulation is the only thing you have to do. Now with the FM, sounds like this. So that just gave it a lot more power and a lot more screech in the high and mid ranges. Now it's time for the filter to make it talk a little bit. I have the high pass notch here, but it doesn't really have to be the high pass notch. It could be the high pass peak or whatever. I just turned the notch all the way down because I didn't need it. The frequency is at 96 hertz going up 39 with LFO 1 here. And this is going to be the main like a wah kind of talking sound you hear. You can see I have the resonance super high at like 96% and I have the drive up at 20% as well. You can see the shape that I'm doing with LFO 1 here. As it's playing, it's going to do a really quick drop down from the height. It's going to drop down quickly and then slide up to this full height again in this kind of wonky shape. And you also want to note at the very end, it does a little slide up to the top. And that's also key because at the very top, you know, it gets really high and screechy, like at the very last moment. And that's also achieved that with the pitch and the filter right here. With the filter, this is what it sounds like. Now that has a lot more motion and life. For the effects section, we're actually going to have 8 effects going on here. So the first off is the filter. Now a lot of people would say this step is not very necessary, and I guess it's not, but it adds just a little more flavor to the sound and a little more layer. It just adds to the screech a little bit because I'm using a Combs filter. This is the Comb H6 positive. The frequency is at 280 hertz going up 4 with LFO 5 right here. Now LFO 5 is on envelope mode. Now this is the interesting thing because this is actually going to follow the pitch of the note. You see I'm going up from here to here with the notes, and with the filter, you know, obviously I can't key track it in the effects filter, so I have to automate it with just the frequency right here. It's just going up 4 with LFO 5, and you can see what it's doing. It's just following the pitch, and that's all I really did that. If you're not going to do those notes, then obviously you'd have to edit this pitch, but it's really not too hard. You just have to adjust how far this goes up or down. The resonance is up at 95%. That's a really high resonance, but I don't have the mix up all the way. I only have the mix up 12%. Speaking of the mix, that is also modulating up 56 with LFO 2 here. And again, this is just going to correlate with the other thing I was talking about, how at the very last second, it goes up into a high screech. The dry wet just gets really high at the very last second, like I did with LFO 2 here. Last second, the mix goes high and you get a lot more of that screech that comes from the Combs filter. All right, moving on to the disto. I have soft clip going on here and there's nothing complicated at all. Drive all the way up, mix all the way up. That's all you have to do. And it's just like adding distortion after stuff like a Combs filter and this kind of vowel-y filter right here is really good because like a distortion, if you know what it does, it multiplies the harmonics across the spectrum. And so if you are doing stuff like this where it's boosting or taking away harmonics, then it'll multiply that effect across the spectrum to make it even more prominent. So it's really good to add distortion after doing that kind of stuff, even if it's just a little bit of soft clipping. It works very well. Next, we're going to turn on a flanger. Again, nothing complicated about this. I'm pretty sure all of these are just the, you know, default settings, except I turn the mix down to 42. I like to do this because as you're playing it, it just sounds a little bit different each time. It's just a subconscious thing. You won't be able to hear it each time, but that little bit of difference just gives it more life. I don't know.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Next up is the phaser. This is going to be enhancing the vowel. I do this with the phaser all the time. Turn the rate all the way down, the depth all the way down. The frequency is at 50 hertz and is modulating up with what? There we go. The frequency is at 50 hertz and is modulating up 39 with LFO 1, which if you remember is what's also modulating the filter. So both the filter and the phaser will be moving at the same rate. The mix is at 50%, but for this effect, I'm going to show you what it's like all the way up. That's a really obvious use of like the phaser or the phaser filter or something, and it sounds good, but we don't want it that obvious, so we're just going to turn it down to like 50%. It's just going to act as kind of a layer. Now for multiband compression to make it powerful, and I'm really driving this up. The threshold is like at -8.1, And ratio is normal, attack and release, and gain are all normal as well. What I did though is I brought the low band down to 0%. Both of these are at 100. I brought it down to 0 because there was a lot of conflicting low frequencies in this bass. And even though I'm taking care of that in the post-processing, which I will get to, I just wanted to get rid of that as soon as possible and just bring it down so it doesn't mess with anything else later. Very, very simple. This is what we got. Now for the hyperdimension. This was not a very wide, stereo wide sound. It didn't have a ton of voices. I just wanted to add a little bit of basic stereo imaging with this dimension right here. I'm not even using the mix. I just turned the size all the way down and the mix up to 50%. This just adds that little extra dimension in the stereo field. We're almost done here. Now it's time for the reverb. What I have on here is a plate reverb. The size is very low at 14% and there's no pre-delay. I brought the low cut up a little bit at 14%. I don't know if that's normal. Hang on, let me check. Nope, it's not. I just brought it up like 14%, 15, whatever, just to get rid of the super nasty low frequencies we didn't want. The high cut is at 35, the damp's at 25, and make sure you turn the width all the way up. Otherwise, you'll just be getting a mono sound. The plate reverb is automatically mono. I highly suggest turning this width up. Now, this is just a really short little bit of reverb. Mix is only at 17%, and that just adds that little bit of room in the background. You don't hear it. You wouldn't listen to this and be like, oh yeah, that definitely has reverb on it. That's just something that fills out the little bit of space that would be missing if you didn't have it. Now this is what we have. The last effect on this one is the delay, and I'm doing what I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all were thinking that I'm going to do. This is the typical thing you do with the delay where you make it metallic. You just make the time variables very, very short, and I like it on ping pong mode. I left it on ping pong mode, doing nothing with the filter. Time variables very short, 1 to 128 on BPM and length, so they're both the same. Turn the feedback up so we can, get that kind of metallic delay, and the mix is at 21%. This just adds that extra kind of metal texture that is used in this bass, and also later on, it's kind of, I'm pretty sure it turns like the dry wet up later because you'd hear it come in as like a sound is decaying at some point. But I added it in there for, the extra metallic effect. Lastly, in the serum patch, this is crucial. Down here at the voicing, you do want to flip on mono legato and turn up the portamento. I have it on 48 milliseconds, but anywhere around there would do. And that's just because we're doing these little slides between the notes, and if you don't have it, it's going to go duh-duh. It's not going to have any sliding motion. It's going to sound very static. So just make sure you turn that on, otherwise you won't get the same sound. Now it's time for me to go into the effects. Without any of the effects, this is how it sounds. And now you can hear, I had the effects on as I was building the serum patch, and now there's a lot of those weird low frequencies that I was talking about. We're going to take care of that. That's the major thing I wanted to do with these effects. But first off, we gotta put on the sound goodizer, at least just a little bit. It's not up very high. It's just like not quite 9 o'clock, just up a little bit to add more power. Secondly, we have this effector right here. First of all, I love the effector module. I love using it in, so many cases. There's so much cool stuff you can do with it. I have it turned on flanger right here, and what this is doing, since I'm not, modulating it with anything, it's just a static flanger. And I have the X parameter here at 73 or so. And I have the Y parameter at around like 82 or something like that, just somewhere right here. The Y parameter is controlling the feedback of the flanger, how you're going to hear it after you lift up the note. And the X parameter is the frequency of the flanger. So what the flanger is doing right here, it's basically just adding that little more metallic vibe to the sound. It's basically doing the same thing that the delay was doing in Serum, except I'm adding it just a little bit more, especially after the major compression that the sound goodizer is doing. Again, probably not necessary, but I just added it in anyway. Lastly, let's go over the EQ. This is kind of some extreme EQing I'm doing here. I'm cutting out the low frequencies like pretty harsh at around, where is this? This is like at around 250 hertz or so. I'm just cutting out any low muddy frequencies that we don't want. I did boost this area a little bit around like 644, just a really wide slope. I boosted it a little bit because I'm taking out these certain frequencies at 572 and at, where's this? Yeah, 1773, just somewhere around there, because when you add these poles like that, just going downward, not all the way, that's a little harsh of an effect. When you just add them going downward, about this much and this much, it adds to the formant quality, kind of the vowel quality, especially when you're dealing with growls. It really cleans up the sound. And again, I didn't want it all the way down because that's kind of like extreme for each of those. I just wanted it down a little bit to highlight the vowel, and it was all about picking the right frequencies for those. At 4,420, I have it just ducked down right here. Again, a very wide slope, just cutting around that area where it was being very piercing. And there is a low pass filter right here, but it's turned all the way up, so you really don't have to mess with that at all. After that, this is what we have. Pair it with the sub bass and you will get this.
I'm a cult of personality.
Now I know some people are going to ask about the sub bass because I'm doing some pretty interesting things with that, and for the sake of the tutorial, since you know I'm already recording the video, I might as well go over it. I was listening to sub bass in the original track and it sounded really like odd. It wasn't a normal kind of sub bass you'd have. So I analyzed it and I went through and made my own sub bass patch in MIDI right here. I'm going to go through exactly what I did real quick. So first off, this is a citrus, so we're going to be using slide notes because I can do that. I'm sorry anyone else who has a different DAW. But basically what I did here was I just made a straight up sine wave, and then I took the first odd harmonic in the spectrum and bumped it up just a little bit here for that just tiny extra layer. We're going to be doing more layering in the piano roll. I just wanted that little extra bit of harmonic content to kind of come through as the sub is playing. This is the MIDI for it, and I'm going to go over what I did here. First off, I have it on C sharp, sliding up to F sharp. And this is just using a really quick slide note. How the slide notes work is as soon as the slide note comes into play, there's a line right here extending from the beginning of where the slide note started and the original note and the end of where the slide note ends, you know, right here. That's how long it's going to take for the note to slide up. So I didn't want it to be too slow. I wanted it to be fairly fast. You know, it isn't like a super slow slide up. But I did want it to be, you know, apparent that the sub bass is sliding instead of just doo-doo hopping up to the other frequency. Now, the only thing about slide notes is that any note you have will slide to that note, no matter how many notes you're playing. If you're playing 3 notes and then you put a slide note somewhere, all of those notes will slide down. That can be cool, but in this situation, we didn't want that because I'm actually layering this with, like, I believe it's a 7th? No, it's a 5th. I'm actually layering this up with a 5th. So what you do here to counter that kind of effect that the slide notes have is you have to go right here. Right now it's on green, but if you go like this, you can select the color. I just selected blue, and now I can put down the notes. Now, if I add a slide note to something like this, like if I add a blue slide note, the green notes will not follow the blue slide notes. Only the blue notes will follow the blue slide notes. So that's how the slide note system works, because you can have all different kinds of slides happening with all different colored notes. So all I did here was I copied the exact same thing, except I moved it up an octave and a 5th, and I colored it blue. That's all you need to do, and this is the kind of sub you get. The post-processing for the sub is very simple. We have a little bit of wave shaping. And that's not doing any like audible distortion, that's just making it louder. And then we go into an EQ, which I'm just cutting out, first of all, below, I think this is like 30 hertz. Yeah, anywhere below 30 hertz and above like 630 hertz. You know, we didn't want anything in that area, so I just smooshed it down. Then lastly, we have a maximus. We're, you know, cutting off all the high frequencies right here. The mid and the lows aren't doing anything. And then at the master, we're doing one of these, which is the half sign. And not the double curve. And that's just general compression, you know, making sure the sub is as loud as it can be almost the whole time. So the sub mixed with the patch, mixed with the song, mixed with a stupid snare in my library sounds like this.
Let the beats work, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching. What sound would you like me to make in the next sound design recreation video? Comment down below. The one with the most likes is going to be the next one. Also, do not forget to download the patch if you want to. There's a link in the description along with links to my SoundCloud and social media and the Spektral Sound Facebook group. There's a lot of stuff going down in there, so make sure to join that, and I will see you in the next video. Peace!
Look in my eyes, what do you see? The cult of personality. I know your anger, I know your dream.